What was the hair like?
They said it's a different atmosphere up there.
Oh, yeah.
Or to breathe. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. Especially if you take a hike or something like that, you get even higher.
It was just a joke.
Yeah. Even the city's literally a mile high. Yeah, I went to a Rockies game and they have a line of seats, and they're a different color than all the rest of the seats, and that is the 5,280 foot mark from sea level. So the stadium is almost exactly a mile high.
Wow.
Yeah, you go to Rocky Mountain National Park, you get out at 14,000 feet, walk down it at 50 yards, you'll feel it, barely. It's like you ran a marathon.
That's interesting.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
You ready now? Good evening. Welcome to the May 15th study session. We have 5 things on the agenda, and the first item is Alliance Against Family Violence request.
Mr. Mayor and Commissioner, I'd like to invite up Joyce Grover, and then any members of the current members of the Alliance Against Family Violence who'd like to come up. We have a couple seats, and then we can pull up a couple too, so don't feel like you're limited by the number of seats.
We have 4 board members here.
Yeah, an entourage.
So, Mr. Mayor and Commission, as the Commission is aware, and I think the public is aware, the Alliance Against Family Violence isn't currently in operation. They've done quite a bit of work to get to the point they are now, and I'll let Ms. Grover and the board talk about kind of where they are now, how they got here, what they faced when they first came aboard, and then let them talk a little bit about what their path forward looks like and how the City Commission maybe can get involved in that.
Thank you so much. Well, as Mr. Kramer said, the organization is not currently providing services. In November of 2017, the executive director at that time made the decision that because they could not meet their payroll, that they laid off the staff and shut down the services of the organization. The board, since that time, tried to figure out if they could get things restarted, and it just felt like they couldn't get ahead of the curve. The organization is funded by state grants with both state money and federal money coming in, and most of those grants require the organization to spend the money before they get reimbursed. Over the last several years, the reimbursement process has gotten longer, making the requirement that the organization really have more cash flow to keep things going. And I think at some point it just caught up with them, that they felt like the most responsible thing to do was to really close down the services because they just didn't feel like they could keep staff on and without the assurance that they could pay them. So the people who were on the board at that time, most of them had terms that were ending. They decided to help recruit a new board, and so we do have new board members here, and I'd like to have them introduce themselves. They're very committed and very excited about raising enough money to get the organization going again. And to their credit, one of the things that they've really focused on is agreeing that this money has to be raised before services are open, because we do not want to open services and then be in the same place of not being able to make the expenses that are absolutely necessary to provide these services. I do also want to tell you that in 2017, before the organization closed, they took in over 1,100 crisis contact calls on their hotline. There were several hundred people who were sheltered in the domestic violence shelter. There were over 800 people that received services that were not shelter related. So people were helped with police response, helped with protection orders. So the need is really apparent and critical here in Leavenworth. It's the only organization that provides these services in Leavenworth. So I'd like to have the board members introduce themselves, and Stan, maybe you can start.
Okay, I'm Stan Cherry. I know many of the folks here. I volunteered for this. My daughter used to work for the Alliance, And I felt, she and I had a lot of talks. I didn't realize that it was, violence was that prevalent. I know that a city of this size, I know about what you can expect, having run brigades with 5,000 people. I know what it was like then. I'm not good at a whole lot of things, but I could raise money. I'm a good beggar, and I don't mind asking people. I don't mind asking people for money if they trust me, and I can explain to them that I've got a cause, and that's why I told Joyce I didn't want to be an officer. I wanted to be the donor chairman. I'm going to be the vice president, but I said I just want to be a hardworking donor chairman. I was that for the Rotary, and I echo what Joyce said. I know there's a rush. I listen to Mr. Kitchens talk about the violence, and I know we need the services. I'm a little bit conservative in my views. I think we have to have some escrow there, or we're going to be rapidly right back where we were before. Once we raise the money and get going, we've got to fix the problem with the distribution to make sure that comes on time. I don't know how we do that, but that's down the road. Right now, our main objective is fundraising. We've got the rudiments of a plan, and I think we won't be dragging our feet. That's we understand that we have to have that money, and we won't let the city down. You can count on that.
Hello, I'm Sarah Gustin. Some of you may know me as Miss First City. I'm the current president right now, so we're very focused on fundraising, like Stan said, and I think we have a lot that we can have working well with our board currently, and I think you guys are going to see that pretty quickly here.
I'm Melinda Harbor. I'm Melinda Harbor, secretary. We all got our new positions tonight. There's 4. Everybody got a spot. We're really excited. We know that there is a great need in the city as well as the county. I'm from the southern end of the county, so I know that we would benefit from it there as well. And I think we're all really excited about pulling off our first fundraiser, just getting something going. It's not going to be great and spectacular, but those are down the road. And we invite all of you every time we have a fundraiser to come. You're more than welcome. And I mean, we want to open a top-notch place, but we don't want to get into the same position that we're in now. So baby steps, but we are getting there, definitely.
Hi, I'm Julie Martinez. I am passionate about the Alliance because I was actually trained by the Alliance as a sexual assault nurse examiner. When they got into financial trouble, I actually donated my services while they still had their sexual assault program open. While there are other organizations, because I also work at Shawnee Mission as a forensic nurse, so I definitely see the need for domestic violence care. And I know the numbers that are here in Leavenworth, and I take care of these patients, and they often are not seeking treatment or getting out of their situation with this closure of the Alliance. And I'm also passionate about starting our first fundraiser, and I ditto Melinda, would like to see you all there, and we'll get more news out about that after next week. But we're excited, and we're really hopeful that we can have this cushion of funding so that we can have continued services and great employees in this much-needed service in Leavenworth. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think the community is very fortunate to have these board members sign on. We are recruiting some additional board members, so you will see some additional names and faces. We have that on the agenda at each of our meetings to talk about who in the community wants to raise money for this organization, because that's really what the focus will be for a while. I work for the Kansas Coalition Against Sexual and Domestic Violence. We're a statewide organization located in Topeka. The Alliance Against Family Violence is one of the member organizations, and it's our role to really try to help support communities who are in this kind of situation, or programs that are in the kind of situation to try to stabilize them. There have been situations like this across the state of Kansas. I mean, just the delays in the reimbursements, but also the delays in reimbursements then start a process going where you start then losing your leadership, and new leadership comes in who doesn't really know the way things work in terms of the finances and the funding. And so we are trying to provide that stability while the organization rebuilds. We're working with an experienced accountant who will take care of the finances while this rebuilding is going on. And we're paying basically keeping the utilities on and managing the building so that it stays stable until the organization can come back. So open to any questions that you have. I mean, the proposal that we presented to the city was the same one that we presented to the county commission. Basically, we think if we can ask you for a matching $50,000, that we would raise $50,000, that this is a way to get the community involved and not basically put it on any one organization or government's shoulders, but really have it be a community effort. So that's what our letter asks for.
I have a question for you. This is for the county, correct? I mean, you go anywhere within the county. Have you asked Lansing, Tonganoxie, Baser?
We have not, and that question came up at the county commission meeting, and my response to them is the same that I'll say tonight. It's just a matter of capacity. We agree with you that every city and municipality in the county should be participating in providing these services. So that will happen. It just is about capacity of trying to get things moving.
I know from our police chief and police department as well as the sheriff, heard, the necessity for this alliance, and when it closed, it left a big hole in the city and the county, and it is very necessary. And I realize the county did give you $50,000 last week or whenever the meeting was, and they do have funds that they do give out to people. To organizations that make, I don't know how much they have allotted per year, but they allow people to come in. The city doesn't have funds. That doesn't mean that we won't do it. If there's a strong enough feeling among this commission, and I for myself feel that the need is definitely there. You're not looking for a loan, you're looking for a grant.
Right.
So when you say a matching grant, I mean, if you have fundraisers, if you raise $50,000, then we would match that up to $50,000. How would those fundraisers be? Are you talking about, you already got $50,000 from the county? That's a straight grant.
Right.
Or that's not a matching grant, correct?
It is a matching.
Okay.
Yes, we have.
So you need to raise $100,000 just in the city, and that's General Cherry's job. And he's the guy that can rob banks or whatever he can do. And, so if he gets $100 grand, then, if we came in for 50, then that'd be 50. And also before the alliance can stand up officially, do you have to have an executive director? Isn't the charter say, with the state, there must be an executive director in place before you are before the organization can stand up?
I would say that's not exactly necessary, but is that the best practice? Yes.
Well,
but I think that we can put together a situation with our help where we are helping to supervise staff that will start us, and as we're hiring the executive director, I say we, it is the Leavenworth County program, but I think we feel really committed to helping get services going. I
may have misunderstood, because when they closed, and I heard that the executive director had resigned, that effectively closed the organization, because I thought the state charter was, you cannot be in operation unless you have an executive director. I could be wrong.
That's not my understanding,
okay.
And I think if that was the case, we'd have a lot of programs closed periodically around the state, so.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
please. Go ahead.
Please,
What I was gonna say, so what we looked at is, when we plan on opening, how we got to the $100,000 was, we realized we think we need a director, we need an executive director, and we can probably meet 3 advocates. That's bare minimum. Would not give the city or the county the services that it really deserves, but that's a start. And how we did that, we took what we pay those people, and we looked at payroll periods, 1, 2, 3, 4 payroll periods, looked at the history of the reimbursement coming in, and we believe when we did all the sums, we need at least $150,000. So we're gonna have to go get $100,000 of that.
Did you lose your 501c3 designation, and did you have to refile?
No, it
Okay,
is
good.
still a 501c3 organization.
That's important.
Yes.
And you're
And they're
still,
in current
still
good
a-
standing with the Secretary of State.
and you're still a United Way agency?
Now, we were just talking about that this evening, and one
I
of
work,
the
I work
board
for
members-
United Way. I
Okay.
believe you are.
Great.
So, anyway, and he asked about your nonprofit status, the director there. I used to work for United Way, and one of the things that helped put you over the edge, which it was a real problem with a lot of agencies, was about 4 years ago when I was working there, we had a government shutdown. And it happened during the campaign, and the Alliance got quite a bit of money through federal employees that were in that. So that was a big hit to the Alliance then, along with all of the other things. But we had to audit the Alliance, or at least look at their records every year. And they were, it was like what you said, the grants were not coming in, they were being delayed, and the expenses were going out, and that put them in a really bad situation. So I really firmly believe there is a need for the Alliance Against Family Violence. There is a problem with violence here. I've seen it. I've worked with the agency before too. So.
I'm not throwing the former board under the bus or something, but did it get kind of spread out? What's the words I'm looking for? They got off mission. They started getting into a little bit of real estate, or not. They weren't into rental properties or anything, trying to make
No, I
money. But it
understand what
was.
you're asking.
They didn't stay on point. They started expanding what they saw their roles, and how do we?
Well,
make sure that doesn't happen
I
again?
understand what you're asking, and to their credit, the prior board really had, over the last couple of years, started closing down those peripheral programs. So they used to run a daycare center, they used to have a batterers intervention program, they had a thrift store, the Child Advocacy Center was part of the Alliance, that has been spun off to CASA. So the board really, over the last couple of years, as they began to see really the sort of the crisis close in around them, started shutting down those auxiliary
Were they
programs.
overextended somewhat, possibly?
Well, probably, but I think for a while that all worked.
Yeah.
And then when it stopped working, they started looking at what can we get rid of? And so at this point, it really is those core services of domestic violence response, sexual assault response, and that shelter facility. So they did
Back to where they
transitional
started.
housing. The prior board did sell those houses, and that was used to pay off any debt, remaining debt for the organization. So in reality, they're debt-free.
How much money do you have in the bank now? Is it zero or like $10 or something?
No, there is about $10,000 in the
Okay.
bank, and that's really basically there to keep the utilities on and pay the.
So you still have your real estate?
We still have the shelter
You're right,
facility,
that's what I mean.
yes.
Yeah, you don't have
Yes.
to say what it is, but you still have, so you don't have to start up from scratch, though you
Right.
have the facility, all you have to do is.
And the shelter facility was owned by another nonprofit, the Alliance Housing Corporation. That has been taken care of. The prior board has closed that corporation and transferred that property to the Alliance. So it's now,
Good.
that was a little piece that.
It's clean, it's clean.
Yeah, that historically, I think there were a lot of people confused about it, but that's been cleaned up, so.
How long can the board member serve?
We haven't really talked about that. We're not letting them go yet, I can tell you that.
So this is a lifetime sentence. Honor.
Are you using the previous bylaws then, or are you
Yes, we are,
recreating
but
those?
we know that we're gonna need to look at those and, just, clean them up to look at current practices and I think that there are a lot of things as I think bylaws are one of those things that sit there and then all of a sudden you look at it and you go, oh, well,
Yeah,
we're not
out of
really
date.
doing that.
Right.
So, that is something that we talked about a couple of weeks ago at our meeting of really taking a look at those.
So you don't need to reincorporate?
No,
You are incorporated, it just went dormant?
right.
Okay.
I wouldn't even say it went dormant. I mean, we've still been actively paying the utility bills
Well,
and.
I mean, but
yeah.
with the services and things,
Right,
yeah, I
the
mean, yeah,
services.
that of course
Yes,
went dormant.
yes.
Commissioner Griswold, do you have any questions?
Where's the shelter facility located?
They can't say that.
We don't talk about that.
Oh,
I caught myself too asking.
Okay, I'm talking about that.
That's okay, but I think it's good to just let people know that the
Yep.
location is confidential as in an effort
good,
to
for protection.
increase
Sure.
protection.
That's good. And I understand the prerequisite in terms of the money, in terms of before you start operations, but, I mean, is there what are you thinking in terms of a date to start? I know it's dependent or conditional on do you have any idea? I mean, just as soon as you possibly can, but it is dependent on being able to raise the money, General Cherry?
Yes.
So that's really then hard to say at this point, although I know you're fantastic.
How long does it take you to hustle 100
But I'm
grand?
worried,
Well,
we gave the Department of Defense a date that we'd have the Sava River Bridge in too, so,
I know.
I couldn't really venture a guess, but I would say, we understand that, it's gotta happen in maybe within a quarter. I'm just thinking how long it takes.
Sure.
And as soon as we start doing the fundraising, I'll be able to give you a much better answer. The one thing I found out about, the people I don't know about the rest of the county, but Leavenworth City, if you ask, I ring bells for Salvation Army,
Yes.
people will give you money if you ask them nicely. And you tell them what it's for, and then you send them a thank you note. So we just have to get people to ask. So I think it'll be sooner rather than later, but I'm anxious about giving a date.
Right.
But I got one in my head I'll share with you. And it's sooner rather than later.
Sure, I understand. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you coming in and taking charge of this whole process to try to get us up and
Well,
going again.
It's, it's so difficult to know that there are victims in this community who don't have a place to reach out in their own community, and that can be so dangerous for people, so.
Well, it's hard with children, women with children, that if they have to go to Kansas City, then the children will.
We have the
try to
chief
get
of
each
police
other
here,
school.
and I know that he's very familiar with the organization,
Yes.
and he has talked to us many times about the big hole in the community, because we don't have this with you and the fellow law enforcement agencies in the county.
Yes, sir,
Please.
Mr. Mayor, I fully support this proposition. Every 24 hours, the Leavenworth Police Department responds to 2 domestic violence calls. It is a tremendous burden on our community. Not having this facility and the services available is directly correlated to public safety. The numbers are higher this year than they have been in 20 years. We need to have this facility back open, and so I'll reiterate my position that I laid out in the goal setting, and again here this evening, it is vital that we get this facility back open.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions for the chief? No, thank you. Mr. Kramer, we don't have in our budget a line item for charitable causes or whatever we call this. How could we, if the commission decides to go forward with this, how do we get the money?
I would probably recommend drawing on our reserves. We have, over the last 40 years now, gotten to a very strong reserve position. This is a relatively small amount. However, I'd like to make my fiscally responsible pitch that you only draw on reserves for one-time expenses, not recurring costs. So if this is a one-time expense, I think that'd be an appropriate use, of course, up to commission expense, but I believe that we have sufficient reserves to make something as impactful as this, a payment from there.
Is this something that in the future could possibly come out of community development funds or not?
So the Alliance is eligible and does receive a small amount from the Community Development Block Grant.
Okay.
However, as from a couple weeks ago or last week when Mary came, that's a small amount. And then it's
yeah.
a small amount of a small amount because there's so many organizations. So that's probably closer in the $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 range. But I would assume they would be eligible for that again, and every little bit helps.
And we did submit an application for the Emergency Solutions Grant, which helps with the shelter facility and some of those basic essential services. That's through the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation, but the city actually applies for that. And then you're right, CDBG was something that the organization got last year, but they were just not prepared to apply when the application was open this year, so.
And since we have new board members here and they haven't selected an executive director, I'll let you know that the ESG grant through the state that the city administers on behalf of the organization has very strict rules. Your reimbursement amounts have to match your bills or your invoices, and that hasn't always been the case. And then your request goes to the bottom of the pile if you have problems with your reimbursement process. So I can't stress enough how important that part of it is, the grant management and the accounting, to stay on, I don't want to say the good side, but on the positive side of those agencies.
Ms. Grover, the way this is a study session, we don't make any decisions here. If there's a consensus among the commission to move this forward, this will become an action item and probably the next commission meeting that we could vote on whether to give it or not. So I didn't want you to think that you'd walk out of here with an answer, yes or no. The only answer that you get here, unless there's other questions to the commission, I'm going to ask the commission, do we have a consensus? Takes at least three of us. Takes three of us to move it forward to a vote, which we'll do at the next commission meeting.
Okay.
So are there any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
I just got one quick question. Did I understand you correctly that the past board got rid of all the real estate?
Except for the shelter facility.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a consensus to move this forward?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Would you like representatives to be here at the next commission meeting in case you have additional questions?
it wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
I don't know that there'll necessarily be questions, but they can see their
wouldn't all
local
have to
government
come.
in action. They can see their local government in action.
You're all welcome to come, but you
Yeah.
wouldn't all have to come.
Thank you so much, and I know.
Maybe General Cherry will be here and he's already got
I just
25
told her
grand in his
I'd
back
go.
pocket.
I'll give you a status report, $10 down.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, General Cherry. Nice meeting all of you. Next item is Festival Advisory Committee recommendations.
Taylor Tedder, our Assistant City Manager, starting it us off on this one.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. I also have Christy Lee, our CBB Manager, and Festival Advisory Board Member Bill Cromer is here as well. As you know, the Commission authorized the temporary board of the Festival Advisory Committee back in late 2017, and we had several community members sitting on the board, and they all brought their own unique outlook and expertise to the discussions that we had. We met in December, January, and February. Commissioner Nancy Bowder also sat in on the meetings, and Commissioner Wilson attended our last session. The meetings were really productive, very positive. The members really looked back at kind of the history of festivals and other events that have been held in Leavenworth. It was very informative to myself. And we also talked about feasibility of funding, who the lead organization could be, different partnerships with local businesses and community partners like service clubs, different locations a citywide festival could be held at, and much more. I'm going to go through the main recommendations that the board had, and then we can have some discussion about that. We talked a lot about the feasibility of the event. The board did recommend that the city would be the lead organization for a citywide festival. They really wanted to see us utilize vendor fees and sponsorships to partially fund the event. It wouldn't be a budget neutral event. However, with those kinds of partnerships, we could make it a lot more bang for our buck. The main expense for sponsorships would be things like entertainment, possibly fireworks, advertising, contests, activities. Then the board talked about time of year options. They thought that late June, early August, perhaps the weekend after Labor Day, September, or even October would be good to capture some of the military in town. Location options were discussed. Really wanted to see use of the Riverfront Park, connecting to the historic downtown with a possible street closure. For those hot summer months, if we had it during that, we could have some indoor merchants in places like the Stove Factory Ballroom or the Community Center. And then they really had a need of incorporating Haymarket Square in that as well. We talked about different types of celebrations and festivals. We researched what other cities do, but really would like to see playing off of old events that many people from Leavenworth know about, like the Buffalo Bill Days, Sip and Cider Days, Riverfest. They discussed having a theme for the event, like a carnival or air show theme, and there was a very big consensus among the board that we really needed a tourist component to bring in outside visitors, filling up our hotels, having them eat at our restaurants, shop in our shops, buy gas at our gas stations. Then we discussed potential activities for the celebration or festival, which could possibly include a car show, parade, canoe races, hot air balloons, a dinner, pancake breakfast, contests, perhaps having an event with cyclists, incorporating the Carousel Museum, the farmers market, having something nostalgic like the Buffalo Bill Century Ride, perhaps have the Fort Leavenworth Army Band play, and they also thought that fireworks would possibly be a big attraction for some people. And just so that you know, the recommendations and options that I just told you about have not been really vetted by our various city departments like Public Works, Police, Fire, et cetera. So we would have to make sure that we get the proper approvals for anything that we were doing.
We've always had children's events too, and you didn't really list that in there, but there are a lot of children's events.
Yeah.
And petting zoos and things like that too.
Sure. So basically, we have Bill here and Christy, and then Commissioner Bowder is very familiar with what the committee had discussed, but I'd like to open this up for any discussion that everyone has, and maybe Bill has anything to add?
I came to listen, but I've talked to some businesses and all, and the real concern is that it ought to be run by, not as an organization that's using it as a fundraiser. It should be something that all of the businesses, the service clubs, all of those have a chance to participate and to profit from it.
Exactly.
You know, and anytime you can bring people into town and they can see all of our activities as opposed to just some, it's got to be a plus. And I think Leavenworth needs some kind of an event that would bring that to town and not shut the town down to do it, but to involve the town.
That's good.
And I mean, the farmer's market was included in it as well. And there were just, every organization, I mean, that was the big part of it. It didn't matter if it was raining. I think it rained every year, but all the organizations had events and had fundraising things, so they had their people there and other people, and we always had a parade, and the people loved parades. They were there in the rain to see the parades, so it was just, you know, that's, I don't think, we discussed names too. I don't think we want to use the Buffalo Bill. I don't like Buffalo Bill, and I don't want to use that name.
I don't either.
But
I like it.
I do too.
I vote for Riverfest.
We really talked more about well, and I think though that somebody has that copyrighted now.
Do they?
So, patented. So, anyway, the First City, we talked about First City Festival. And it sounds pretty generic, but I think it's all encompassing of what we do, you know.
Mr. Tedder, you presented this. Are you looking for any action from us, or are you just giving us a briefing on what has been done? Is there any action that we're looking for here, or?
So what we need to start doing is, we're probably looking at a 2019 start to something. We need to start going from the broad recommendations and start narrowing down. Whether that's the theme, whether that's the location, the commission can decide what you want to take up first. But that's what we need to start doing, so that then I can have an idea of how to accomplish what it is you have envisioned. So you can start talking about those ideas tonight, or you can suggest an approach to start narrowing down on those items.
Go ahead. Well, I like the idea of First City Festival, and I'm not sure the theme has to be the same every year. I mean, if we went with, you know, it could be different. I mean, Leavenworth is known for a lot of things.
Right.
Performing arts
But
at the
still,
top
you don't
of
want
the
to
list.
change the name of it every year.
No, I'm not
because then
talking
you
about
have to-
changing the name. I'm just
as far
saying
as
within
branding it,
that branding,
Yeah.
just, I think, to me, being able to maybe change the theme, the main theme every year, every few years, might be an advantage too.
I do too.
And I think
Great
that should be
idea.
taken into consideration with respect to the planning.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is Ms. Bowder's comment about the kids' games. We participated in the carnival for a couple of weeks ago, and that was very well run by the young lady's mother and grandmother. And all I can point out is that even the most simplest games, like the fishing pond, which I was responsible for. I mean, those kids, I mean, it just was really unbelievable if it's done right. And that particular carnival was, in terms of the planning and preparation. So just a little anecdote, but the games can be simple, but if they're done well, the kids will have a good time. So that's my contribution at this point.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited about the festivals. Hopefully it takes place next year. I would definitely love to see carnival and a big festival. I think that'll be real exciting. You'll be able to catch the kids during the spring break time, and then you got the big festival that we all can look forward to toward the end of the year, the summertime. And I think that'll definitely attract more people to come to the city, especially when we have some consistent events taking place.
If I could add, the Riverfront Park is a beautiful place. And Chief Kitchens would have to talk about security. But you know, if you close the gates across the railroad track, you have an entry at the south that you can control people coming in and out of the park. And so the security of an event in that area on the river, I believe it could be done. And there's parking to get them in there, and you have a control gate. And so it would seem to me that security would be a much easier thing to do, but you have to put gates across the railroad track there.
Mike, I hope we do have a festival, and whether it's First City, Buffalo Bill Days, whatever. As long as the carnival, a lot of things for the kids. I like the idea of September, not the weekend before Labor Day. People are, they're half broke after buying all the school items for the children, and sometimes the last weekend of summer, they're off, wherever they might be. But if you have it in mid-September, we get all the Fort people are in place, weather's still nice, come down cool nights, and kids can get a caramel apple, or I can get a caramel apple, and, just all of those things, and, carnival type atmosphere, and maybe it has a theme, whether it does or not. I don't think people say, oh, it has this theme, I'm gonna go. They just go because they're fun. There's a lot of things going on, a lot of vendors from kettle corn to, whatever it might be, some carnival type things would be good. I like the Riverfront Park, but what scares me about the Riverfront Park is you got a 4-year-old kid there, they're going at 8 o'clock at night. Well, they sell beer at these things, that's fine, not that anybody's, this 4-year-old kid takes off, jumps over that fence, he's in the river. And the police chief and the fire chief have, responsibility. And it's just dangerous, because I know when I was 4 or 5 years old and I was 10 or 12, I used to jump in that river, and that's stupid, but
there?
they will
Yes,
do
he
it.
did.
I jumped off the train
Climbed the
bridge
bridge,
and
too. Didn't you? Climbed the
went all the way
bridge,
down
under
to
the
the
bridge.
VA Center. There's a lot of kids that do.
Yeah,
And, but,
I did too.
you know, it's just enticing and it's somewhat dangerous, but there might be ways around it. I like the idea of the southern entrance, closing off the tracks too, and I'm not trying to poo-poo it, that we have to deal with Union Pacific. You know, that's their property, and what we can't do, I don't know, we can just say, hey, we're gonna close that down, you know.
Not the
run-
track
No, I know,
itself,
but
yeah.
still, it's their
This side.
property, they have to
Yeah,
approve
you
all of
can't
that. You
close.
can't, we
Okay.
can't just say, we're gonna put up a gate there.
Okay.
You know, unless you wanted to park your car across the street.
I can do that. So, but I think having it, but I think we need to give, the city manager some direction here. You know, whether I want it September, October, April makes no difference, but I think the committee needs it.
The committee needs to work on that.
Put something together, because I'm sure we all have our ideas. Is this something, that potentially would take a staff member?
I think that'd be premature to say until we,
Till you evaluate it?
until we kind of go, and that would be my main role in this, is to take the vision you want and then enact it. Whether that's a contract employee, an actual city employee, that would just be a determination that we would make. The staff
We don't want
level.
to get too far in the weeds with this, as far as, you know, the details of it, because.
Well, I'd like you to get pretty far into the
committee-
weeds.
What
And I
answers
guess
do
that's
you
another
want?
question from the committee is, do you envision the committee continuing to meet on this stuff, or is the baton now being passed to the city commission? That's something that I'm unclear about.
I think the committee there should be a committee that does this, that are made up of people who are involved in the
The
festival.
same committee that's met, because the only problem I see with that is looking at the Festival Advisory Commission, you know, this is after 3 meetings, we have June, August, September, October, I mean, is that committee gonna be able to narrow all these down and bring something back to the commission, and what role does the commission have in forming that?
Should we pick a date?
It's up to
Does anybody here want to pick a date that we want them to shoot for?
I think we need to pick out the festival first, or what we want, before we pick a date. My suggestion is to use the ones that they've got down on our sheet, from the car show clear down to the fireworks. Each of us take this same sheet in our next study session, mark 5,
Do we have to?
that you
said-
want to do, and then we'll take a vote on those.
I think we should start small, honestly.
What do you define that? What do you mean by that?
I mean, not try to do everything. I mean, there's a lot of stuff right here. These were just all ideas that came up and things that were done in the past, but I think we ought to start with just a few things.
Yeah, but
to
someone's gotta
start
do
out
that,
with.
that ground level work, and I think that's what the city manager is suggesting, that at this point, whether the committee's involved, that's fine, but I would put it on the city manager to do the next step of detailed planning, to come up with a more specific concept plan. I mean, this is a very general concept plan, but you're gonna need to do probably a little analysis on, whether you go the contract employee or somebody on the, I don't know if you're to that point yet, or.
Well, before I'd be comfortable doing that, I would need stuff like location, so we can start working on scope. We've
Haymarket
talked about Haymarket, we've talked about the river, we've talked about certain areas, but I think that's maybe the biggest thing that we need to focus on first is where.
Where timing is not important.
Well, I think the timing it's not
I don't think
January
it's
to
gonna happen this
February.
year,
I think
right?
the
So-
windows
No,
needs to be narrowed.
2019.
2019, okay.
It sounds kinda like September, of 2019 is a
It
pretty
used to
good
be-
consensus.
It used to be the second week of September
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
And you already
It was the same
proposed
forever.
mid-September.
Yeah, I think.
40 years.
In my personal opinion, mid-September, weather's usually, it can be very, very hot, but it's never very, very cold.
Yeah.
I think more people are in town than you have midsummer, and
I would agree on the location, but you may need to do a little bit more analysis than we've seen tonight in terms of the pros and cons of the various locations. I mean, that would be the next
Yeah, and
task.
the good thing about that is we have experience at all the locations, so we know a lot of the pros and cons about holding large events in certain areas.
Right.
We've done, Jazz by the River, we've done, other events down there, so, whichever location you really focus on is your decision, and we'll make it work. I guess, are there more than two in the air right now? Haymarket and the river area? Are there other ones to consider? Are those really the two? I could bring back a pretty detailed analysis on those two sites, but are there any, that's the direction I'm looking for. Is there a third one? Is there an alternate that you're looking at?
It depends on what type of festival you have, because I could see closures in streets.
Well,
Right.
especially if you include a carnival and stuff,
Yeah.
like where's the carnival gonna go, and where, you know, so you're including some other areas.
Right, if we're talking about rides, then I don't know that the downtown area at all is feasible. Then you're looking at a 10th Avenue Park or a Ray Miller Park if
Yeah.
you're
Well,
talking about.
We've used other parks in the city for some of these
Yeah.
events.
we
Right,
used
like the
10th Avenue
Sampler
Park,
and-
the
yeah.
Freedom Fest, whatever it was, 4 or
It
5 years
wasn't all
ago.
downtown.
But Larry's point, I think Mr. Dedekey's point was that maybe fleshing out what we want with a little more specificity, and then getting into the locations, because
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, if we don't, we're talking carnival, festival, but we may need to be a little bit more specific than that.
Yeah, we need to pick one to work on, and the next year we'll
So,
pick a different
those,
one.
Yeah.
those two things.
And I would look to the commission for that direction, or the board, or with those about, what we're trying to fit somewhere. And when you say carnival, is it a carnival theme with carnival type food and pony rides, or are you talking about a Ferris wheel? I mean, are we talking rides and that kind of thing, or more just like a traditional festival?
Well, let's figure it out.
Well,
Carnival.
that-
Road.
Yeah.
Big carnival type thing was always a problem with that was always the biggest problem was the
Chief, you
carnival,
wanna
wasn't it?
be, you don't, maybe you don't.
Wait,
wanna-
no.
They're trying to slide out the door.
I'm here to help.
I know,
I've been around for
well,
a while, and we've
yeah.
done it all. Words like parade gather my attention. So just keep in mind things like the homecoming parade was on 10th Avenue, so I heard 10th Avenue Park, but there was concern about that, so we moved it downtown. Things like parking, how big it is, all of those things will have a role in what I think would be your decision. My recommendation would be, tell us what you want to do, and then we'll recommend the best spot for it, based on all of those things in our experiences. I think that's the best approach. Whatever it is that you do, I mean, did I hear hot air balloons? Did I really hear that?
We did have it.
No, I don't think that's very practical,
Well,
because
I
you
mean-
have
It
to chase
was, no,
vehicles.
we did
Yeah, I know,
have
but where can you?
Oh,
They
we
were,
had
they
to
were out in
chase-
the county, they were
I
out
know.
in the county, yeah.
Right, and so
Yeah,
that's what
and
happens, is
even
you sort of get
in town.
together, you brainstorm a bunch of ideas, and then when it gets down to the rubber meets the road, you really have to kind of
Really
think
have
about
to,
that.
yeah, they're not all gonna work.
Right, so I think that's where we are, or I would say, my experience would say, tell us what you want, even if it's not as definitive as you're ready to decide. Sort of generally where you want it, we'll plug it in where it goes, and then vet the rest of it out in terms of the rest of it.
I like the 10th Avenue Park, my personal opinion, because I know remember the Freedom Fest 3 or 4 or 5 years ago? And there's so much room out there, everybody can set up, you can walk from this hot dog stand to the kettle corn, it's all there. When you have it downtown, we have businesses that we have to worry about, we have street closures, just different things. There's plenty of parking out there, because we can partner with the school district.
And the school's back in session at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's,
which is a
it
bigger
was, we had it, it was over Veterans Day 3 or 4 years ago, remember we had that thing? And it was well attended, I believe.
Yeah, they set up a big concert stage and.
Yeah.
So.
But, what were you gonna say, Commissioner?
Just a recommendation, should we table it and come back with some more ideas?
How soon,
Commission, so we can think about it,
But I don't wanna overthink it either, I think we just need,
just the next study session?
I think the first thing maybe you need to do is decide whether the Festival Advisory Board is still active. Are you gonna still meet? Does the commission want to give some general direction and have that
We just
direct
told
to
them
that
it was gonna
board?
be temporary until it came here, and then we didn't really know, so.
Right, and that
Well-
board's gonna need direction.
That if we keep
I'm
it
not
in
actually
place,
for
a
it.
task could be to just get this thing defined down in terms of what, at least for the first year, what we want. And I agree, probably having a little bit of an appetite suppressant, maybe that first year, might be the way to go. But I mean, that could be the task of that committee. They meet once or twice and define it
Yeah.
down, and maybe.
Yeah, narrow it for you and you and me.
Right.
Yeah.
I can tell you one place they didn't wanna have it, and that was Ray Miller Park.
Right.
what?
I think if Mr. Grant were here, Mr. Grant would tell
He
you
would
he was
explain
always
it
worried about, water and drainage.
That's
what
He
happened,
was
like,
worried a
it's
lot
too
about
far
that.
out.
He had
It's a
walls.
mess.
It's not in
We
the,
got
it's
really,
not in the
really
center of
lucky,
town,
but,
yeah.
in terms of that, and then my concern is parking, it's not very, parking friendly to a large event.
Yeah.
You know, when people had to go across 4th Street to get from,
Yes.
you know,
10th
everywhere
Avenue
else.
Park.
Yeah.
Parking is much better there, it's.
It's in the middle of the town too,
Bigger.
so that's good.
Yeah.
What if the direction, Mr. Tedder, and let the commission chime in here, that we ask you to get your festival committee together again and specifically give us, time of year that you want it. You got 5 options here, give us one. Tell us, okay, here's what we're shooting for, whether it be September, October, late June, whatever it might be. Tell us the theme that your organization is recommending, you know, whether, I hope it's not an air show, because Atchison would, Atchison kind of has that one locked up, I think.
Yeah, I think that we can certainly do
Yeah,
that.
some,
And then I can bring us
come
streamlined
up with 2 or 3
proposal.
location things, and then we'll, with the chief and maybe the commission, we'll play Solomon then, and we'll pick out the location. But as to what you want to do, when you want to do it, and even if you come up with the name, I don't think that we're gonna say your names, if you come up with a name for us, if you give us 5 options, then we're gonna have 5 different opinions here. You come up with a name and say, this is what we're gonna name it, I think most will say, that's fine.
Agree.
I'm not gonna fight you over a name.
I can certainly come up with a detailed proposal from a couple more meetings with the Festival
Yeah.
Advisory
Yeah.
Board.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'd be good with that.
Let them debate it.
yeah, let you guys figure it out, because we're gonna have 5 different opinions up here.
Sure.
Bring us something and,
Well, we specifically chose the people for this group who had experience either with fundraising, with event planning.
Sure.
Or with this particular event in the past.
Good.
So that was why we wanted to get there
Good.
anyway.
Looking at the locations, you know, there seemed to be a lot of talk about 10th Avenue Park. All 4 of their options are in the downtown.
yeah.
So, I mean, just so, that's obviously a direction they have come.
Right.
And I can add a
We keep
little
hearing
more
from the
on
public
that.
saying we want to bring the festival downtown. Do we want to have it downtown? I don't know.
One of the reasons that the board really felt that downtown was the place to be is they wanted to make sure that all of our downtown businesses and other businesses had the opportunity to
Right.
get foot
Well, and
traffic
that's
and people
fine.
in there.
And-
One of the reasons they did not like Ray Miller Park is it was kind of alienated from businesses and the parking
10th
is an
Avenue Park
issue.
is,
Same thing, yeah.
is out there too.
Yeah,
And-
so.
Well,
Yeah.
and another thing, downtown was in case of weather and stuff, and some of the events were better inside,
Yeah.
like some of
Yellow.
the train shows and things like that were better inside than outside, so you had that option to go either in or out.
And that conference
And
room
having
and the
the-
stove lofts is
The
really a big,
stove lofts would
that's
be
a
good to have
big, big
vendors
facility
and
for an
crafts
indoor.
and things like
But
that.
you don't need one generalized location, you can have
You
satellite
could have them,
locations.
yeah, they,
And this
Yeah.
gives the business a better chance.
I can't speak for the chief, but I think some streets easy to close on a weekend would be from Esplanade and Cherokee north to Esplanade and Shawnee, because there's no houses there. Cherokee from Second down to Esplanade, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, chief, I'm not committing to anything. And Delaware from Second down to the community center. You have one business that's normally open there on Saturdays, Door Mail. There might be another one. I know Larry O'Donnell, the CPA's closed, you know, there might be
You've got a
one or
drugstore
two.
down on Delaware.
No, but I'm thinking from Second down to the Esplanade, just that block. So you'd have from Second and Shawnee south to Second and Cherokee, all that
Right.
closed. And I think only business that would be affected are door mail, retail business. And then there's parking all around. People may have to walk a block or two, but I mean, so. But I mean, those are just ideas, but that's for the festival committee to figure out.
rather than us working kind of blind without the city there, except for Taylor. I think, you know, when I used to set up the festival every year, we had an initial meeting before we even talked about if we wanted to expand or move it around. And I did the Riverfest for a few years and met with someone from the police department, the fire department, the
We still do that for every
the
event.
parks. And so maybe have that input in the start, you know, at our, you know, at the start of it.
You have
Just a
the-
few people there to just tell us, we can't do this if we're making these decisions.
If you have a
It'd be good to
meeting,
know
you
before we
invite
came
the
back
police
here.
chief and the Parks and Rec
Parks and Rec.
director?
Yeah.
Director of Parks and Rec? And,
Would that be
yeah,
okay?
because
or just someone to represent your
Yeah,
department.
so we don't have to debate it here. I mean, the chief may be able to veto
Yeah, we
something
don't
right on
bring
the
it,
spot or
bring it
tell
here,
you.
then you say no. Have them say, no, we
Yeah.
can't do
Yeah,
that.
we
could
can
you just-
narrow the scope.
And whoever, what's always the issue with electricity, and so maybe, Hal or
So
whoever
the
does that.
normal course of events would be that someone comes to the city and says, we have an event we would like to do, and then here's what it is, here's where it's supposed to be, here's when it is. Once that happens, then we
Okay.
vet that through the city departments, and then Hal can talk about electricity, and I'll
Right.
talk about
Yeah.
parking, the fire department talks about generators. So that's sort of the normal course. I don't believe that we sound like we're quite there yet.
Okay, that's fine.
Although, it might be okay for Steve and I to come sort of sit and listen to the next
Yeah.
couple of, and kind of maybe.
And you can
help
say,
steer.
oh, we can't do that. You know, you can tell us that right off the bat before we.
And could you just bring up to your committee, just a suggestion, to accommodate the small businesses, if they did a small festival for the downtown area, and also a big one for the 10th Avenue Park?
It's possible, yeah.
Just one small one, one big one. I know we
At
gotta
the same
get to
time,
first-
or at the
No,
same
different
time?
times, yeah, twice a year. But I know we gotta.
Well, you
get
know,
the
Main
1 year
Street does
down
a lot
first.
of things for downtown
Yeah,
too,
they
but
have
they've,
barbecues and things.
and they do their barbecue and they do a lot of other stuff too, so, for the downtown businesses, so maybe this shouldn't be,
Well,
lumped in with that.
I think you've got some marching orders here. I
Yes.
mean, you've got some direction, and why don't you guys meet and come back to us with not
Certainly.
5 options on every option. You come back and say, here's what we're proposing.
I
And
think,
you'll have some input from the police chief,
yes.
Parks and Rec.
I think my next steps will be putting together that streamlined proposal, with working with the, Festival Advisory Board. And then the next step after that would be looking at maybe budget implications, and how we could get that in to make a 2019 event happen. So I will do that and bring it back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thanks,
you.
Mr. Cromer, good seeing you.
My
You open
pleasure.
Saturday morning?
Say again?
You open tomorrow afternoon and Saturday morning?
Yeah. And we've had,
Good turnout.
we've had our best opening Saturday.
Oh, last Saturday was unbelievable.
And then, last Saturday was not
I mean, the
bad
first
either.
Saturday. The
The
first Saturday was
Saturday was
the,
our best one
yeah,
ever.
yeah, it was a
that's
great
great.
day.
That's great.
I drove by, couldn't find a place to park.
Yeah. I think it might stir.
And I know.
Good.
There's 10th
Yeah.
Avenue parks in every city in the state.
Good to see you, thank you.
Makes us.
Okay, next item, new programs for housing assistance.
Yeah.
Here or there, do you care?
Wherever's more comfortable for you.
Yeah,
I know
Just sit hop
that
here.
you want to sit down?
Yeah, I think-
Would you rather sit
No,
down?
I'm good standing.
You
thanks,
better
sir.
standing, okay. Just had knee
Since this is
surgery.
my first time in front of most of you, I just kind of wanted to introduce me, introduce the programs that are currently going, and I think that might save a lot of questions. Only planning on being here 5 minutes. We'll see if that holds true.
I'll time you, Pat.
I'm in charge of the housing choice voucher programs that we have here. Currently, most people call Section 8, and that's what people know it as. The housing choice voucher standard program, we currently have approximately 200 families on the program right now. Out of those 200 families, I'm going to give you some demographics just so you know who's on the program, because a lot of people get confused about that. Out of the 200 families, 75 are elderly, 49 are disabled or handicapped, not elderly, and that leaves 76 families that are neither elderly or disabled. The median monthly income is $1,200 a month. The median HAP, which is the housing assistance payment, how much money we pay for their rent, we only pay about $410 per family right now for that program. Other demographics, out of the 200 families, 110 are Caucasian, 70 marked African American, and 20 marked other. So other could be anything from mixed races to Asian, Hawaiian, Indian, whatever the case may be. Our waiting list for that program is currently closed. It closed in November of last year. That means nobody else can sign up. The reason I did that was we have 350 families currently on the waiting list. When people were coming in to sign up, I was telling them between 5 and 10 years is the waiting list. And I think that 5 to 10 years. And I think that's kind of silly to have people sign up for something and be waiting 10 years for it, so we closed it down. On the waiting list, out of that 350 families, again, 51 marked elderly, and we just ask before they get onto the program, we just ask them if they are. So this is what they
What's
have
the
marked.
definition of elderly?
62 and over.
Oh, my gosh.
So most of us are there or close to it, right?
You're the only
100 of them, 100 of those families out of the 350 marked that they were disabled or handicapped, and then 199 marked that they were neither disabled or elderly. We have a preference for the regular program. If you get a preference if you are elderly, handicapped, disabled, working full-time, which we consider 25 hours or more, or you're a full-time student. And when we talk about full-time students, we're not talking about 18-year-old kids that are living off of their parents still. We're talking about people that are adults, generally that have a family, and they're going to school full-time to better their lives. Out of those 350 families, 250 out of the 350 marked one of those preferences. So most of those people are doing something with their lives, or they're disabled or elderly and cannot. That's kind of our standard program. Now when we get into special use programs, we have one right now, and that's called the VASH program. It's for our veterans. It's ran through the VA. And both of the programs we're going to be talking about tonight are special use programs. That means that there's another entity that's going to be helping us with this program. So right now, the VASH program we have has 110 families being assisted at this time. They can go up to 130. They have the funding available to do 130. So there's 20 families that could be added.
Do you have a waiting list from the VASH program?
Yeah, but that's all done through the VA. The VA decides if they're eligible. The VA then brings them to me, and then we go through the process from there.
Okay.
And that will be true for the other two programs that we're talking about tonight. The VASH program, again, 36 are elderly, 23 are disabled or handicapped, not elderly, 51 are neither elderly or disabled. Their median income is $1,100 a month, so just $100 less than the regular program. Their medium HAP is what we pay is $355, which is less than the other, and that's because most of our VASH program is single. You know, the majority of our veterans that are on that program are single, so they don't pay near as much rent as what our other programs do, which are mostly families. Again, the VASH program is kind of the model to look after tonight. So what happens is somebody that wants to be on the VASH program goes through the VA. The VA decides whether they're eligible due to HUD's and the VA's program requirements. Once they decide that, they come to me, I give them a briefing, we give them a voucher, and that's when they start to go out and search for a house. The two that we're looking at tonight is the mainstream program and the family unification program. I'll speak about the mainstream program first. The mainstream program provides funding to assist non-elderly persons with disabilities who are homeless, at risk of homeless, or institutionalized or transitioning out of an institution or segregated settings. It helps further the goals of the ADA by helping persons with disability live among the community. It encourages partnerships with health and human services agencies to support those programs to live independently. I have spoken to already Mr. Reichard with the Guidance Center, and then also Mrs. Denny with the Riverside Resources, and they both said that they would like to be part of this program. And that's kind of what I wanted to see from them. I didn't want to get too much into the details of what they'll be doing or what we'll need from them until I got your permission that we would even have a program or asked to have a program. But both of them thought that there was a need. They both wanted to be a part of this. I'm also going to speak with someone from Welcome Central Catholic Charities about the mainstream program, so that we'll have many of them, but we'll have to decide which one is going to kind of be in charge of it. And then they'll get with the others and say, hey, if you have someone, you can send them to us. The deadline for the applications of this is June 18th, and we're hoping to receive between 10 and 25 vouchers, and that may not seem like a lot, but HUD considers us a small program, a small city, so they're not going to give us hundreds like they did with the VASH. A lot of people were shocked that we got 105, and that beat a lot of big cities, but that's because we have a VA that is considered outstanding right now. I think if you go around to other VAs, you'll find that ours has a very high mark. So in the consideration, we got a lot more than most cities our size. because we had a big VA. But in this, I'm expecting between 10 and 25 vouchers is what I would expect if we get awarded. Now, we're gonna be competing with every city, every county, every housing authority in the United States for these. So I don't know if it's going to be, 5,000 housing authorities or 50 housing authorities that are applying. So we'll find that out when we get awarded or when we don't. The second one is the Family Unification Program. It provides funding to assist families who lack adequate housing as their primary factor in getting the children returned to the family. So let's say that somebody who is struggling in life, the kids get taken away, and the reason they can't be unified with their parents again is because they don't have adequate housing. Then that's who would be eligible for this one. Also, who would be eligible would be children that are leaving foster care. So between the ages of 18 and 24, I've been a foster parent. I don't know if any of you have, but once they turn 18, the funds get cut off, whether the kid's ready to be left or not. So this would kind of give them another option if a family's not willing to take care of the kid till they can afford housing. This program would. There's limitations on all of this. There's rules on all of this, but I'm not going to get into that. It's just mostly, do you feel like there is a need for these programs? And if you feel like there's a need, do you want me to, continue further? As I had said in this, and I said to Paul, this is not going to cost the city one dime. This is all going to be funding through HUD. This is not going to cost us any new people to work for us. I'm going to be doing all of this. I'm doing this because I believe it helps the community and it helps the people of the community, because really all I'm going to do is do more work and not for any new pay. And again, if I didn't believe in this, I wouldn't do it. But I believe in the long run, this is going to help our community. And if you have any questions, that's my whole speech.
And I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate it. You definitely have my support.
I agree with what you presented and urge you to go forward.
I talked with Keith Rickard over at the Guidance Center about these programs and the foster care and the issues with regard to young people being thrown out of foster care and with nowhere to go. Right. And I think there's a need. There is definitely a need.
Go ahead. How many vouchers in terms of the Family Unification Program?
We're hoping to get 10 to 25.
For both of those?
They would be separate. These are two different programs.
Okay.
HUD is a giant entity. They have thousands of programs.
Okay.
We're asking for these two separately. So one won't have anything to do with the other. The person that makes that decision for the first program won't make a decision for the second program. So they won't, just because we get one doesn't mean we'll get the other. And if they say yes to one, they could say yes to both.
But there's a possibility of 10 to 25 for both of those programs?
That would be my guess. If they want to give me 100 of them,
sure.
that'd be great. I'll take it. But I don't expect it because of the size of our city or our county.
Mr. Tully, real quick, let's say we get 25 of each, that's 50. Will that then give you the ability to inspect 50 homes? That you can physically go in and make sure they're...
yes, and that's another advantage of having these programs is because it means that I'm going to go out and look at the place.
Not just the yard, you can go inside the house.
I go inside the house, I go under the house if necessary. I go, I've gone through crawl spaces up north to see, I couldn't believe that there's furnaces and crawl spaces and there's, air conditioning units, whatever it is underneath. Water heaters, I go inspect all those, and then I do anything all the way up to the roof. I don't climb on the roof, but I look at the roof, so I go top to bottom.
Yeah. But it'd be, one of the things that I know this commission's talked about is be more houses that would be inspected inside and out, that we don't have the ability to inspect now.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I had another question in terms of, at least for the Family Unification Program and maybe with the mainstream program, you would be working with a lead public child welfare agency? And which agency would that be?
For the Family Unification, I've contacted SRS and they said that I probably need to contact KVC. So for the Family Unification, it'd be KVC. For the other program, like I said, we haven't made a decision, but I know Mr. Reichert and Mrs. Denny both said that they were interested in it. So that would be the Guidance Center and the Riverside Resources.
And did you say KVC?
KVC. They're kind of in charge of the kids, when they get taken away.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Dooley? Do we have a consensus to have him go forward with making the application?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
That doesn't take an action on our part, just consensus, correct?
Right, yeah.
Please go forward, and good luck with your need on trip on the way out.
Hope we get these. That's no guarantee that we'll even get them.
Okay, next item is leaf collection program and leaf vacuum purchase.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and Commission, I'm going to bring our Public Works Director up here and let him take over in a second. Really what this is there's quite a substantial lead time on ordering new leaf vacuums. We would bring that in the CIP. We did a little bit of research after presenting to the Commission earlier in the year and believe that if the city wants to do a leaf program in 2019, that we would bring a CIP request in a couple months to you. And we did some research on 20 cubic yard vacuums versus 30 cubic yard vacuums. There's a little price difference, but a lot more bang for your buck. And so this really doesn't affect 2018. I want to make that clear. We have our two machines that we have now, we will get through 2018. And this, if the commission would like to continue this program in 2019 and beyond, a consensus tonight doesn't obligate you to anything. It just gives staff direction to then prepare some information for the CIP process in a couple months to bring those new vacuums to your attention, which would be ordered in 2019.
For use in 2019.
For use in 2019. The 30 cubic yard would also give the commission flexibility in future years to maybe change the scope of the program. Larger vacuums, two of them, that much different capacity and that much better technology could potentially allow you to do the whole city, should you choose, but you don't have to make that decision tonight.
I've got a question for Mr. McDonald. What are the main purposes of the leaf collection program? The two or three main purposes of the leaf collection program?
Well, we were directed to collect them by the city commission.
Yeah, I understand that. I looked at the history, I've read the history and everything, but now, one of the things we talked about in January, I think, was trying to help with not having the leaves get into the stormwater system and things like that. And that makes sense to me, but what are the other purposes?
Citizens, leaves are great when they're on the trees. When they're not on the trees, they're a problem. So it's been the direction of the city commission that we should arrange to have them picked up. There are collateral benefits to that. If the leaves are picked up, they're not in the ditches, perhaps clogging some drains or slowing down the flow or creating a slippery mess in the yards and things.
Right.
It also benefits in our interaction with our EPA expectations on stormwater.
Okay.
Leaves are natural, they fall off trees naturally, but
Sure.
apparently if you collect them and take them to a composting area, that's seen as a positive thing in stormwater management. The byproducts from the leaves that we do collect is a compost that's used by the Parks Department. It's often shared with the community at no cost, if our needs are met as well. So it's really a public service provided by the city to the residents, and I know it's very frustrating. It's a half of the city each year, every other year. You get your leaves picked up.
Well, that was a very good articulation of the purposes, and I support them 100%. But then I get to the half of the city, and is there a disconnect there with what we're doing it for half the city, but what about the other half of the city in terms of being able to support those goals or objectives that you just talked about?
The city has provided that you can place your leaves in with your regular trash, and it gets picked up with your regular trash. You can take them at no cost for disposal at the city's brush disposal site off 2nd Street across from the wastewater plant. You're not prohibited from burning them, but fewer people do that every year because you do have to have a barrel and that sort of thing. You can't just burn a pile in the yard like you could have maybe 30 or 40 years ago. So there are options. There have always been those options for people. A lot of people use a leaf service. They want, when their leaves are ready to be picked up, they want them picked up now, and they will contact the yard service companies. Many have purchased leaf vacuums and do contract leaf collection.
And keep in mind that city just picks up from like the curb in 3 feet or whatever, that you have to have them raked up and piled up there. And we do Spruce to Metropolitan, and Metropolitan back to Spruce in the same year. In alternate years, Spruce to Limit and or Eisenhower and Eisenhower back. The times that we did try to do the full year, it just couldn't happen. It was impossible to manage the expectations. Even now, it's very difficult to manage the expectations because we don't put out a schedule. It's not like on Thursday, it's trash day. You know, they come by and somebody says, well, I had my leave, I'm getting my leaves out tomorrow. Well, truck.
I think it's
here
also,
yesterday.
there's some cost, constraints if you were to do the whole city, right? I mean, in terms of the magnitude of that
Yeah, we
job,
could-
which
we
was
could- we
outlined
could-
in your,
could
so,
do
I
it.
mean, it'd be nice to do it,
Yeah.
but I think that you've laid out a pretty good case that we certainly have to invest in a lot more resources to do it right, so.
I know Becky Beaver, our street foreman, is here this evening, and she worked really hard with our public information officer to try to be as coordinated as we have been. I think it's been better than previous years, but that's a constant exercise in keeping people updated.
Sure.
And, you know, you could start at October 15th, October 20th, but you're really not gonna have any business until about Veterans Day.
Right.
And from Veterans Day through Thanksgiving is when it's happening.
Yeah, and all bets are off if you get an early snow.
Yeah.
Because
and
not just the
then when it
leaves,
rains
not
or
just the
snows,
leaves,
and
but then the
you can't
cruise
do it.
transition, you put the blades on the trucks, you start doing that kind of stuff,
And
so,
then, and
yeah.
then people say, where, can't
Yeah.
get them. No,
It's
it's tough to manage.
Yeah, well,
But I know that Commissioner Dedeke loves the program.
Yes,
I know. But what do you
I think
think,
it's been a
20
great
yard?
benefit.
It has been, I'll agree, I'm not gonna disagree with you.
You're not.
No, I've done that too many years.
I
I've
just-
done
I
that too many
remember
years.
some
Mr.
good
Dedeke, have we
arguments
gotten pretty good
with that.
feedback from the citizens, though, in terms of the
I do,
program?
yeah.
Okay.
No, and I have too.
Okay.
The reason I have spoken against it in the past is it's just impossible to manage to expectations. Some people say, you know, I had my leaves ready and they went by yesterday, why didn't they come by today? And people get disappointed. But everyone that has used, I've heard nothing but positive on it. I've heard people being disappointed because it didn't happen. There is some disappointment. They put them all out on the curb or on their, on the grass or right there on the curb. And then it snows that night or rains heavy that night and then it gets cold and then it just gets you know, they're there basically all winter.
Yeah.
And they have been there all winter at times.
It's a free service. Is what
Yeah,
we
it's a
gotta
free
look at.
service, yeah, and it's not like trash, it's guaranteed, but it's, guaranteed as much
Well,
as
and it's not
possible.
like trash in that it, it doesn't pay for its own equipment, it doesn't pay for
Yeah.
its own labor, it is truly.
And there's
It's really
benefits to
a
the
civic
citizens
service.
and also the city overall, in terms of what you pointed out,
Right.
about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah.
At least, that's what I heard,
Yeah.
so.
So the direction you're looking for, do we go for a 20-yard or 30-yard machine?
Well, no, we would recommend the 30-yard. The direction I'm looking for is, do you want to continue this program in 2019? And we'll work on CIP requests now.
Do we have a consensus?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Now for the fun thing.
I think that's your shortest presentation, Mike.
Yeah, you didn't hear it.
They detectives.
Mr. Mayor and Commission, the police department, half a dozen of us or so, are here to demonstrate some of the newest technology that we've acquired over the last few months. I'm going to start with the Faro Technology Laser Scanner, okay? To do that, I'm going to sort of frame the conversation and talk just a little bit about crime scene and scene investigation, which is where this will play a prominent role. The two general ideas behind a crime scene is, number one, when something happens, our investigators, our officers arrive, and they evaluate what they see. They evaluate what they see, and then they can draw certain conclusions from what they see and the evidence that they collect, so that ultimately, if we define that a crime has taken place, that evidence helps us prove that. We give that information to the prosecutor, and then we identify who we believe is responsible. That's the first part of a crime scene. Good, Brandon?
Yeah, we're set.
Okay. Second part of the crime scene is the necessity to capture that moment in time and preserve it so that at some point, sometimes as much as a year to 18 months to 2 years later, we have to bring the jury back in time with us and show them what it is that we saw tell them why it is we did certain things, and then define for them why we made certain conclusions. So those are the two principal primary reasons why we investigate a scene. There's also the same thing that would happen in a traffic accident that were very serious, someone might be killed. There's always potential for a criminal case. There might be civil litigation. There's all kinds of reasons why we have to do that. And so what I'm going to try and do this evening, or the team's going to do this evening, is take you from what we used to do, and by that I mean like a couple of years ago, through the technology that we have now, and demonstrate how far forward we took a leap. So a couple of years ago, on the left-hand side, there's a 2011 case that we did a diagram, and on the right-hand side is one that we did in 2015. So back then, what we would do is the investigators would go in, they'd take some pictures of the house, take some pictures of the crime scene, and they would get out a ruler, a tape measure, and start measuring from here to there. How big is the room? Where's the bed? Where's the nightstand? That sort of thing. If it was the kitchen, all of that. That takes hours and hours to do. Then you have to come back to the station and recreate that. Okay, so these are some samples that we had 7 years ago and 3 years ago. Okay, next slide, Brandon. Then we acquired a piece of technology called a total station, which was a slight upgrade. This is a traffic accident located at 10th Avenue. So there, we have it set up in the hallway, so after the demonstration part, we'll go out, you guys can kind of take a look. Essentially, it was a little bit better in that two people still went in there. It was a little bit more sophisticated. I'll have them tell you about it if you're interested in much more detail. Careful, they'll talk your ear about it because they love that stuff, all right? That still requires hours at the scene and then hours back at the station with manipulating the software, okay? So we acquired the Faro laser scanner, and we spent Friday afternoon in here, in this room, for about a couple of hours. And then Detective Mance took it back, spent about an hour, hour and a half manipulating the software, and created this rendition of the crime scene, which is the commission room. As you can see, in a matter of about 3 hours, if there were a crime that took place here, that would be our newest crime scene rendition. That's what it looks like. All of the detail, all of the specific, very clear information, no matter how long it is. Can you pause it right there, Brandon? Sure. No matter how long it is from when the crime took place, there would be no question if we're presenting to the jury what it is that the crime scene looks like. The next part I'll talk about is the drone. Okay, we have that. You can coordinate, you can incorporate drone video and photographs into this rendering if we needed to. If there was a technical question by someone challenging our case, let's say there was a dead guy who'd been shot, something like that, and there were either a weapon or bullet holes or something like that that we needed, someone would say, well, how far is that? We can take this information using the software that exists and measure exactly, just based off this rendering. I think that the specific number of data points was 2 million, right? Something like that. 4 million data points.
In this room.
I'm sorry, how many? 400. Sorry, 400 million data points collected. That's what it's, right? 400 million data points collected in about 2 hours. And that's what it's able to create. Why this is important, the fundamental piece of why we argued and got this piece of technology is what the jury told us, okay? So every time there's a jury trial that takes place and there's either a guilty or a not guilty verdict, we have the opportunity to talk to them. What did you like? What do you need to see? Why didn't we find this person guilty? And what they tell us most often is we need to see some more technology and more sophistication. Understand that the normal person draws a lot of what they see about crime scene investigations from TV. 48 Hours, CSI, that sort of thing, right? And so people watch that, and some of the stuff they see is valid. Some of the stuff they see is exaggerated for the person's TV. But that's the framework that some folks get to. And so they told us that. They told Mr. Thompson and his attorneys consistently, we need to see a much more sophisticated technology in terms of what we're doing. And so that's what we got. That's what we get. So Brandon's going to stop. That was a little 45-second video that he created. He's going to go into the software and kind of tell you what we can do, demonstrate a little bit of the things that we can do with it. Give us just a second. So that is outside of the commission chambers, okay? So he will take you now inside the commission chambers and kind of move around, and the dotted lines represent distances and measurements and those kinds of things. And
So
so
you can just click on that and it says this is 42 feet, 36 feet wide or something like that.
manipulate all that, and that would obviously be relative. I told him no blood and guts or anything like that, but obviously, for the purposes of crime scene rendering, any question that needs to be answered as it relates to the crime scene is here, it's recreated, it's captured and stored forever. And so that's how far we've come forward by this one piece of technology. We use it for crime scenes. We use it for traffic accidents. We will start probably when the summer, when the schools are out. We can take it in, and not for the purposes of any kind of crime scene or anything like that, create these renderings so the officers can be familiar with what the inside of a school looks like. We can have those digital maps and have all of this so the officers can look at that on their MDT in the car if necessary. If we have something really, really bad happens and we need to have a command center, we can, do this sorts of thing. The sophisticated technology is quite fascinating, and that is just about that. Any questions about this particular thing?
Commissioners?
No?
It's tight.
It's cool, right? Are you amazed? Because that was part of your prior commission action. You had to be amazed. So the next thing I'm going to show you, we acquired some drone technology. We have been spent a lot of time, about a year and a half, on deciding which drones and which particular drone technology to get. Can you bring up the business park video?
I will.
First.
Do you want to introduce the officers you have here for all of us?
There's like everybody here. All right. So this is Sergeant Andy Brinker, our drone pilot. That's Detective Brandon Mance, Sergeant Ralph Sorrell, Detective St. John, and his assistant detective, who wore a very nice, lovely red dress for the purposes of this meeting tonight. Sometimes babysitting is a little tough. Amy is back there, RT, and Carol, she's been helpful. So we have a drone. We have it. There's a variety of reasons why we could do it, but first and foremost, here's a little few-minute video. This is the business park. We went out there yesterday morning, launched the drone, recorded some video. So there's about half a dozen reasons we think that the law enforcement profession can use it. One would be a tactical situation. If we have something bad happen, where there's a hostage situation or something, we can launch the drone. It will fly over, give us the overwatch viewpoint, and it will record. So if anything happens, we can have that as part of evidence. Okay. Search and rescue. If we lose a little one, a silver alert, somebody that's elderly that has mental acuity issues that gets lost, we can launch that to drone. I'll show you in a minute some stuff we took at the river. If we have issues at the river, stuff like that. Training, we can use this to fly the drone over the whatever training scenario we've got, use that to review, learn. We can also do crime scene investigation, incorporate this as part of crime scene investigation, that sort of thing. That's Eisenhower. Here in a minute, I told Sergeant Breaker to pick up the pace. She's driving it like a grandmother, so he'll pick up the pace. Goes about 40 miles an hour. We have to operate at less than 400 feet. With the FAA, we can't go that. We can't go on post. It can go up as high as 16,000 feet, which is awful high, but we can't do that under our licensing provision. But I'm looking for a loophole because I want to see that.
Keep over the prison.
Yeah. So here in just a second, I'll pick it up. But we did that so you can get a tour of the business park and how it's going out there. They're obviously making some progress on that. I'm very satisfied about the quality of the video. Yeah. It's very clear. We can zoom in. We can hover and take pictures. And so if there's a particular spot that we need to photograph that's weird, we can launch the drone, hover it by wherever it is, and we can take some pictures of it, which I'll show you a couple samples of that.
This is obviously the subdivision just west of
Right, that's a subdivision.
What about a cloudy night, no stars?
Right, weather is an impact, rain and cloud, and it can fly in the rain, cloud, it depends.
Doesn't have infrared capability though?
We did not do infrared or FLIR because of cost.
Okay.
Okay, those things, they have them, but they get really, really expensive fairly quickly, and we wanted to do some.
NCIS has one.
You heard him. Sergeant Brinker, you heard the mayor.
I'll get a bid tomorrow.
The scanner does not need any light.
Right, you can, do some stuff with the 3D scanner in total darkness, which
All right.
sometimes we're out, and you can see a rendering of what happened. So let's show the Centennial Bridge.
Hold that up.
We'll just let you know that the senior staff called my video boring, so I added music this morning. That's the river, the Centennial Bridge this morning. We have the occasional body that's floating in the river or something like that from a suicide or something that we have to have about once or twice a year. If there's an issue with...
There's issues with the operator.
Operator error?
Yeah,
Sorry about
right
that,
here.
Brandon. So the uses of it are endless. I've gotten a number of requests from other city departments, from the street department, from Public Works, from the treatment plant, about mapping out, doing some video for them. So we'll establish a rental fee or something like that, and see if we can't.
What elevation are you right now, approximately?
I'm right at 100 foot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Which-
117 right now.
Okay, so over the top of the bridge there. So we have it. If you're interested, we can launch it and fly it around a little bit. I think there's enough daylight to see it, but that's it. A couple of really fascinating pieces of technology that took us pretty far forward in our leap in terms of what we can do. I'm very excited about that. We picked our drone pilots, and they're going to go to FAA Part 107 Drone Pilot School in June, which is about 3 or 4 days. Not simple to do all that. So we'll get that started. Sergeant Brinker's just been testing it, flying it all around. So
What about training for the scanner? Do you have, I mean, that takes some training too, doesn't it? Or-
that was a solid week-long class. We had to, as part of the acquisition process, we included training in it. So someone came here from California, spent about a week and certified them in the use of that. That's important in terms of court. You can't just, turn it on and start playing with it and go to court. You have to be certified in the use of that. We'll spend a lot of time practicing with that in the coming weeks to make sure we're good to go. We've had it out on a couple of events in the community so far, on 2, and we'll continue to do that as needed.
What do we think, how frequently will they come with updates for the software? I mean, do we have any idea in terms of?
The contract afforded us 2 years with the updates.
Okay.
I don't think there'll be a lot of updates here recently because that company acquired all of the software to do that in one package. So it's pretty state of the art right now.
And as usual, what happens, they'll want a maintenance agreement after the 2 years, and we'll include that in our operational budget. That's $1,500, $2,000, something like that. That'll come with the updates.
And that's just the scanning software that you saw tonight. That is not the actual crime scene software that does things like animate car wrecks, does blood splatter analysis, and all that. That also came with the program, and we have the upgrades for that.
And then the sort of next phase of that is virtual reality. We're not there yet, but what can happen, or what would happen, is they would create a crime scene like you saw here, and then a person could put on the VR goggles and essentially be like they are walking around in the crime scene. That's the sort of next step that we'll wait.
So just say if the drone is damaged, if it's out there on the battlefield, what happens to the information?
Well, Sergeant Brinker would be in trouble, sir. First of all.
The SD card doesn't have to be in the drone. On the my monitor that I have that I can fly with, I can record the SD video onto that.
Okay.
So it'll go onto the monitor that I have. The drone would be maybe lost or damaged, but the video can still be kept on the SD card.
And we have that out to show you how that kind of works right out here in the hallway. So that's it. If you think of anything, we're going to also think about some promotional videos for the police department in terms of recruiting. I mean, so there's some ancillary uses for it as well. Anything that we can think of to benefit the community, we will certainly try that.
Are other police departments doing this, or do you think you're kind of on the?
So Kansas City, Missouri, the Kansas City, Missouri Police Department right now in our area is probably the most skilled. We went over and took a trip, and the gentleman over there showed us. There's a few in the area that have them, which is about the way that I like it. I don't like to be first in trying something like that, and we let them sort of learn some lessons. I think Kansas City, Missouri's had it for a couple, 3 years. Sure. And then so we're about where I like to be at. We've learned some, they told us don't do this, don't do that, and don't do that. So we've been, had that benefit.
I know I was at PD a couple weeks ago for Employee of the Quarter a month or so ago, and Sergeant Brinker Employee of the Month, I'm sorry, brought in the drone after we're gone, just in the conference room, which is probably half the size of this room, and he flew it around, just, and it didn't bounce into any walls or anything. It was amazing how well he could do it. So do you have something out in the light court you want us to adjourn to look at?
If you'd like to, it's out there. If we're done, I mean, but in terms of on the way out, but the meeting, if you guys wanted to take a look at some
You don't want us
stuff.
to do it as part of the meeting or no?
No.
Okay, but you have some stuff.
There's some stuff out there to look at,
Okay.
you know, as the
Thank you.
meeting adjourns here.
Thank you.
Okay. Any questions, Chief, or?
No, good job.
Staff?
Great.
Now, why aren't you
A demonstration.
running, you're the IT guy? You're the one that's smart enough to run the computer, they can fly it?
So there are seven officers that were certified with the Faro scanner.
Okay.
And I just happen to represent both the detectives and our SWAT team, because we can also utilize this to do scans of buildings such as the schools. So that way we have some prior knowledge of the layout of the building. So
But you're not gonna be a drone pilot?
No,
Just
sir.
gonna have, Sergeant Springer's gonna be the only drone pilot?
No.
Okay.
No, sir.
Three.
Well,
He's gonna supervise and then three.
And they'll all be FAA certified?
Yes.
That's cool.
Good. Any other questions?
Thank you,
Thank you.
good presentation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks, interesting. Well, so you're set up out in the light court, we'll be out there when we adjourn here. Comments among commissioners? Any comments?
That's exciting.
Commissioner Dedeky, Commissioner Griswold, Commissioner Wilson? I have nothing, Mr. Kramer? Okay, we are adjourned. Come out in the light court and take a look at what he's got.
Yeah, they're pretty neat.